what is an executive of production and development, as well as your current position as executive producer?
Right. I think the title can mean different things depending on where you are. And Marvel is structured unlike a lot of companies in Hollywood in that we tend to be a production company and a studio all in one. Meaning, typically, if you think about a movie that's come out from Warner's or Universal, there's the studio executives who tend to have anywhere between 20 to 50 projects that they oversee individually, and then the production company or companies that are probably more hands-on with the director and writer in making the film or the television show. At Marvel, we actually don't have outside producers, so we serve as the producers for anything that we make. And thus, I have a lot less properties that I look over. So typically, I'm on a movie for 2 years, and then I finish that movie, and I'm on another movie for 2 years. So I don't have a slate of 50 things, which allows me to be more producerial than some executives. So it's a bit weird at Marvel because we're antithetical to how the rest of Hollywood operates. We have now, I think, somewhere in the ballpark of 20 executives, because each executive takes 2 years to make whatever they're making. So you need that many people, as we've now begun making not only 4 movies a year, but 4 Disney Plus shows a year and animation. Wow. So, but if you were to ask a typical Hollywood executive what they do, they're sort of more global. They're sort of seeing everything from 5,000 feet, and probably aren't working directly with directors or writers on a daily basis. It's more sort of periodic check-ins to make sure something is on the right track. There tends to be then a producer, or again, sometimes multiple producers that are probably on the ground with the filmmakers making the film. So when you, for instance, watch the beginning of the movie and you see Universal and you see Original Pictures and you see Skydance, like these are all different companies with their own people who are a part of that film. Marvel, it's just us. So it's a much more streamlined creative team.
Gotcha. It also sounds like there's an awful lot of responsibility and pressure based upon that. Because, but in real terms, can you sort of unpack a little bit what that looks like in terms of? We're very clear. If we take Black Panther as an example, this is a property that's been in the Marvel universe for some time, obviously, as a graphic novel. Yep. And then there is the bringing it to the screen.
Yeah.
At this point, how much possibility is there? How much bandwidth is there for you to directly get involved in the shaping and the repositioning, so to speak, of the project? Right. So in this case, with Ryan Coogler, for example, as a writer, where does it begin? What does that conversation look like?
Yeah, we sort of have, over the years, refined a process that I think is pretty helpful in that, I've been at Marvel for 11 plus years. When I first started, if we were launching a new property, what we would typically do is say, hey, for instance, we want to make Black Panther. Here's a bunch of comics writer or director. Come back and tell us what you think the movie is. And the problem with that is there's so much in publishing. There's often 50 plus years of material. It was very hard for us to get on the same page with the creative person because, frankly, they weren't in our heads, we weren't in their heads, and our development process wasn't bearing a lot of fruit. What we've started to do then is each executive, each producer on a property is sort of responsible for reading literally every appearance of the Black Panther in this case. And I put together a document that outlined what we thought the movie could be, elements from publishing in specific runs that we thought were interesting to leverage, elements from publishing that we weren't interested in doing, suggested secondary characters, suggested villains. And we packaged that document, which is roughly 20 pages, with a much smaller group of comics and went to filmmakers. And so when Ryan came to pitch on the movie, he already knew kind of what we wanted and was able we were able to get on the same page a lot faster, and conversely, people who maybe were interested in the property but didn't want to do what we wanted to do knew very early on we were never going to be on the same page. So it's actually helped us to weed out people who want to make a different movie than we want to make, and also helped us to find those creative people who I think look at the material the same way and get the ball rolling faster. So the process was Ryan was literally like giving him that document. He said, I love this. You know, that document was very much in the most broadest sense that we really wanted to dive into the world of Wakanda because that is what made for us it distinct amongst the other Marvel properties. We really wanted to position T'Challa as both a ruler and kind of in our language, the James Bond of Wakanda, somebody who was pulled into two different directions because he has to rule, but he also has to go on covert missions and sort of be out in the world, which Ryan also really liked. You know, there were elements of, there's a writer named Christopher Priest who did kind of a seminal run of Black Panther. And that was all about T'Challa having to sacrifice personal relationships for the greater good. Like there were sort of elements that we really liked that Ryan also really liked. What he was very interested in, and that wasn't in our document really in a big way, was the Killmonger story. The story of African Americans who felt disenfranchised from the continent. And the tension between those two conversations, right? The tension between being African and being African American, and where there is sometimes a disconnect between those two populations, and why that's an interesting conversation to have, especially in a world of Wakanda that is in our storytelling the most advanced nation in the world. So those were kind of the things that we brought to the table separately, and then we hired Joe Robert Cole, who co-wrote the script with Ryan to help Ryan sort of, you know, build the film, because the truth is writing these movies is a full-time job and directing these movies is a full-time job. So sometimes it's very difficult for somebody to do both really well. And I think Joe was very helpful in taking some of that burden off of Ryan from a writing standpoint, so he could frankly prep and direct the film.